Hey guys, and welcome back to Nico Dev. This video is the second video on the mini-series that I've been doing on this channel about making a chat using Firebase SDK in Unity. Just to recap on what we have done so far, as you can see, we have a simple chat system scene, and we can enter a message, say at example hello, and we can enter our name, which is Nico. Okay, I almost entered name, and then if we hit send, we are gonna receive that message. Now, in today's video, I want to focus on doing some authentication on the users. Meaning that I cannot just say that I'm Nico or I'm any other person, but I actually need to authenticate using an email and a password to register as a user. In the next episode instead, which is probably gonna be the last, we're gonna focus on editing and deleting messages. So I hope you are excited for this mini-series, and if you are, leave a like and subscribe if you're new. Alright, let's get started. So before actually starting with the new stuff, I actually want to do a little bit of changes to what we did in the last video, which is in the description, by the way. Oh, that's my OBS. All of the code used in this video will be in the description, and I will also comment it every single time there is a new episode of the series, so you can have the different versions for the different progress that I do in the series. So it's going to be the part 1 commit, the part 2 commit, and the part 3 commit. Alright, so one thing that I want to add that I mentioned in last video but I actually didn't end up doing is a way to stop listening for messages, because right now, as soon as we load the app, we start listening for messages, because as you can see, this function right here is called, where is it called? In the chat handler start. Now we want a way to stop listening for messages, and in order to do that, we actually need to store this listener that we are assigning to the child added method, or observer. So in order to do that, I could just say message listener is equal to current listener. Oh, actually I don't want the object, I only want this. Okay, now this makes sense. And we can actually make this variable a global variable, and it can actually be just private. Okay, great, so now we will always keep track of this. Alright, great, and now when we want to stop listening for messages, I can do a new public void stop listening for messages. And I don't think I need a fallback, because I don't think anything can go wrong with stopping to listen, so I just need a callback. And basically all this function will do is go on the reference.child, and instead of adding the message listener, it's going to remove the message listener. And we can just make this pretty like this. Okay, great, and another thing I wanted to do is actually make this class accessible in every scene on Unity. We actually only need this class in in this scene, okay? But in order for this code to be actually cleaner and, and people to actually enjoy it more when they see it on GitHub, we can make this class, since it's an API, we can make it global. So in order to do this, we have to create a new scene, okay? And this is gonna be just our launch scene, okay? Our loading scene, we can call it, loading scene. And basically we're gonna start the app on this scene. Here we're gonna create a new object, and we're gonna call this APIs. Okay, API is just a name I use myself to indicate something that is global or something that can be used anywhere. It's just a utility, okay? But you can call this naturally any way you want. And basically the trick that I do is that I put every single class that I want to be an utility right here. So in this case, it's the database API. And then also I create a new utility class. I can make it right here, and I call it loading scene handler. So this is gonna take care of the loading scene. And basically this one, as soon as it initiates, is going to set don't destroy on load on this game object right here. So this means that this game object will be global and will not disappear throughout scenes. And so we add the loading scene handler to this class right here. And actually, sorry, I'm gonna change the name one more time. We're gonna call this main handler, okay? And the reason I do this will become pretty clear right now in the future. Or we can call it main API handler, or API handler, just this. And the reason I call it like this is because this class is going to have all of the references to the different APIs. Now, right now, we only have the database API. So I can make a reference to the database API, and we call it database API. And in the start, it can just get the database API. Now that this is properly set up, I can go back to the scene that we did before. And as you can see right here in the main handler, we have the database API. We actually don't want the database API right here. And in the chat handler, when we were looking for the database API, see, we were looking for it from the inspector, we actually removed this from here. Since this class is not static, I also need a reference to the API handler itself. So I will make a reference to the thing itself, which is we're just gonna call it instance. Great, so now I can just do API handler.instance.database API, and I have access to the database API class, just like it was a static class. Okay, and I need to copy the same code here. Also guys, I'm sorry if you guys are looking just to how to make the authentication, and I'm here just fixing things around, but I think this is important to actually get a good project out and don't make any mistakes in the future when writing code. Like, now that we have everything clean and set up, we are ready to actually start the episode. Because what I want to do in this episode is actually create a new API, which is basically gonna be the Authentication API. So, okay, that's my OBS. So all I really need to do is go to the scripts and create a new API, and then it's really simple to instantiate it. See, now thanks to this setup, I can just put the Auth API in the loading scene, and I can add a reference to the Auth API right here, and this is actually already accessible from everywhere. Okay, so what are we gonna do in the Auth API? Just two methods. We create a user using an email and a password, and we sign in a user using an email and a password. So first of all, we need a reference to the authentication system, Firebase Auth, and we can call it Auth. And then by default, so, you know, just to initialize it, we can say that Auth is Firebase Auth .default instance. Naturally, remember to import Firebase Auth. Okay, and I just copied the three functions we need. I'm gonna do this so it's actually quicker. So basically the first function will sign up a user, it will need an email and a password, and also we will give the callback, which is what is going to happen if everything is alright, and the fallback, which is what is going to happen if everything went horribly wrong. It's basically going to use the auth method that creates a user with email and password, and it will get the email and password, and then after it did this method, it will continue with a task. And just like we did for the database API, if the task goes wrong, it will do the fallback with the exception, if it goes alright, it will do the callback. Literally the exact same thing happens when you sign in a user, except you use the sign in with email and password function. Now remember, the fallback will also occur when the user has entered a wrong email and password. Finally, we have the sign out method, which is just gonna do auth.signout, and basically all this does, I believe, is it just disposes of the credential that the user knows. I don't think we can actually see the code that's behind this, but yeah, that's basically all it does. So there is no callback or fallback because it's gonna happen instantly. Okay, great, we are done with our API and we can already access it from everywhere. Now let's actually create a scene which is gonna be our sign-in scene. And in this one we can just have some fun and create some UI. Okay, perfect. I think this is all the UI we need, and this is gonna be the email, and then we're gonna have sign up and sign in. Awesome, this is going great. Now, one more thing we want to add is actually a nickname field. We're not gonna use it right now, but we're gonna need it in the future, so let's add it right now. We're gonna add it right at the middle, so right here, create a new input field, and this is gonna be the nickname. Okay, in order to actually manage all of this setup, we're actually gonna need a class that does that. So we create a new empty object, and inside of this we create a new class which is going to be the sign-in scene handler. And basically, just like the chat handler did for the chat class or the main class, this is going to do the same for this class. So it's going to connect the buttons and the input fields to the actual APIs. Okay, let's actually, before writing any code, let's actually put this class in our scene handler game object. And now this will only have two methods, which are just basically sign up and sign in, which are gonna be called when we click those two buttons. Okay, we also need a reference to all of the input fields we have in the scene, which are the email input field, the nickname input field, which we're gonna need later, and the password input field. And now we can just call from the API handler, we can call the Auth API, and we can just sign up the user using the email input field and the password. Okay, and as a callback, since when we sign up a user is gonna automatically be signed in, we can just bring him to the next scene. So we can just do scene manager dot load scene 2, which is gonna be our database scene. Okay, awesome, and I believe we also need a fallback. The fallback is just gonna be debugging the exception. Now you might have to do some work on this exception, or do like some handling of this exception, because the email could be formatted wrong or the password could be too short. There are a lot of things that the user might do wrong for the authentication not to go through. But in this case, we're just going to debug that logit. Okay, great, and I think this is all there is to it to this class. Or actually, no, I'm wrong, because now the nickname actually comes into play. Right after we sign up the user, we actually want to keep track on the database of their username. In order to do this, we have to create a new method in our database API. We're just gonna need a string, which is gonna be our nickname, and then we can have the usual callbacks and fallbacks, just that we don't need a message as a callback. Okay, great. And this is gonna be similar to the post message thing, but instead of posting a message, we're actually gonna post the nickname. And now, where are we gonna post the nickname? Let me actually open up Firebase. So right here we have all of our messages, and this is the only message I sent at the beginning of the video. Instead of messages, right here we're gonna have another branch, which is gonna be called users, and underneath this user branch, we're gonna have every single user. So we're gonna have their ID, so user ID 1 as example, and underneath this user, we're gonna have all of the user information. In our case, the only information we really need is their nickname. But naturally, in your app, you're probably gonna have other values as well, like the first name, the last name, even the country, I don't know, anything. So this is where we're gonna put the nickname. And now, since you're probably gonna need other values to the user, not only the nickname, but also, these other values that I mentioned, let's actually not create a method that is called post-nickname, but let's actually call a method post-user. And basically, instead of getting just the nickname, this method will get the entire user. So let's actually create a user class which is gonna hold all of the information we need. Now, the only information, as I said, in this project is gonna probably be the nickname, because we don't need anything else. So we can just remove mono behavior and make it serializable. Great, and all we need is a public string, which is the nickname. Okay, awesome, and right here we can just post the nickname, and it's gonna be a type of user. And where do we have to post him? We have to post him in users / and right here we actually want the user ID of our user. Where are we gonna get the user ID from? Well, from the Authentication API. So we just go to the API handler.instance.auth.api, and I believe we can get the auth information. It's actually private, okay. Now, to keep our code coherent, we actually keep this variable private, but we create a new method, which is public, which is gonna be getUserID. And all it's gonna do is gonna return us the auth.userid, current_user.userid. Now, this function is going to fail miserably if we didn't sign in correctly, because if we didn't sign in correctly, the current user will be null, so it will return us an object not sent to an instance of an object exception. But since we know that this function is only going to get executed once we actually post the user, and we're only going to post the user after we signed up correctly, but in your project you could always, assert that the current user is not null. Okay, so right here we can just do getUserID, and I think this is it. Yeah, because we're gonna post in this branch, we are gonna post our user. Great, and now let's actually go in our sign-in scene handler, and let's actually call this function. So API handler.instance.databaseAPI.postUser. And we're gonna create a new user right here, and it's gonna have, as parameters, it's gonna have the nickname, and it's gonna be equal to the nickname input field.text. Okay, great. We're also gonna need a callback, which is just gonna be sending us to the new scene. So this one right here, once we're done with everything. And we're also gonna need a fallback, which is just gonna be debugging the message once again. Now, right now, we're only gonna make the user able to post his username and all of his total information once he signs up. But naturally, you can call this function again if you ever create like a settings scene where the user can freely change its user information. We're just not gonna worry about that today. Okay, great, and I think we're done with the sign up. The sign in is gonna be significantly easier because we're actually not gonna need the nickname. We're just gonna do a request to the sign in user this time. And as a callback, we're just gonna bring the user to the next scene, while the fallback is gonna still be debugging the exception. Now, you might have noticed that also I didn't use the sign out, the sign out function yet, but we're gonna implement it right now. We're gonna go in the chat handler script, and since this name might be a little bit too vague, okay, we are gonna rename this class, the chat handler class, to the main scene handler class. And the reason why I'm doing this is just for consistency, because in the sign-in scene, we have the sign-in scene handler, so in the main scene, we will have the main scene handler. Okay, I'm not sure why my IDE is giving me problems with the refactoring. I guess I'm just gonna reload. Okay, great, it figured it out. It just took a bit. Alright, so right here we can have the sign out function, and you might say, Nico, why do we put it right here? Well, because this is gonna be actually a button. If you don't remember from last video, this class will handle all of the UI of this class. So it will handle the send button, as you can see, the send message. And now it will also handle the sign out button, which is a button that we're gonna put right here. We actually don't need anymore the your name input field, because we are now using authentication. And right here we can create a new button, which is gonna be sign out. And it's just gonna call the sign out function, which is just gonna be this API handler dot OTPI dot sign out. And now we are really close to testing the code and actually seeing how many mistakes I mistakenly made. But before doing that, we actually need to set up the class from the inspector. So we go in the sign-in scene, we go right here and we set up all of this stuff. So I believe this is the email, this is the password, this is the nickname, and then I believe the buttons were backwards. So okay, this is the sign up button, and I'm gonna add a listener to it, and it's basically gonna execute the sign up function, and instead this button right here is gonna execute the sign in function. Great, and now the last thing we have to do is actually go on our Firebase project and go to authentication and actually enable the authentication sign-in. Now I had already did that on this project, but I'm just gonna show you how to do it. Just go to sign-in method, and right here in email and password you have to enable this. It's gonna be disabled by default, and you can just do enable to enable it. Great, and now finally let's test this out. Let's go to the loading scene and let's hit play. And now we're gonna probably be redirected to the new scene, which is gonna be the main scene. Oh, except not, because I didn't set up any scenes in the build settings. Yes, this is something I forgot. So we have to set up the order of where the scenes are gonna be loaded. The loading scene is gonna be loaded first. Then we're gonna go on the sign in scene, and it's gonna be loaded next. Boom, and then lastly, the main scene is gonna be loaded last. Oh, whoops, no, I didn't want to do that. But just this. Great. Okay, let's try again. It seemed like it worked, okay? I started in this scene and now it redirected me to this scene. So I guess I can just write my email, my password. I actually need to delete the account if I haven't already right here. Okay, I did. I can write a nickname, which is going to be Nico, and a password, which is just going to be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Now, I believe 7 is the minimum requirement for a password. You actually cannot make it shorter. We're going to sign up and see what happens. Oh, okay, I believe it worked, because if I reload the page, we're actually gonna have the account, right? Yes, we have the account. For some reason, it didn't bring me to the next scene, though, so that is concerning. We're gonna try to figure it out in a bit. Did it actually write something on the database? Let's actually see. Yes, it did. So it also wrote out on the database. It wasn't supposed to write it right here. Okay, we're gonna fix this problem in just a sec. But I did write something to the database, so why is it not working? Okay guys, so I think I figured it out. So basically this function right here, this callback right here, which is loading the new scene, cannot run. Because basically I believe this callback is not running on the main thread, and I believe Unity can only load scenes if Unity is running code on the main thread. So this code will actually be ignored and will not run. Now, luckily, I already had this problem before in one of my projects, and I knew how to fix it, and I lost some time there, so this is not gonna be a struggle right here. It's not a big problem to fix it. As I said before, you could either use some external library that can convert this code and make it execute in the main thread, or we could do a simple trick right here. So basically right here we could just have a flag, okay, which is a boolean, and this flag is basically gonna return true, it's gonna be true if the sign-in went correctly, if everything went correctly without any problems. And we can call it sign-in complete. And here, instead of, handling this new scene and going to the next scene, this code is just gonna set the sign-in complete flag to true. And we want the exact same thing right here. And now we can create a new function, which is going to be basically the update function. And this function, every tick, it will check if the sign in complete is done. And if it's not done, it will return. But if it is done, we are going to actually yeet the user to the next scene. Okay, so this setup should work, because basically all that this function is doing is setting this boolean to true, which is allowed, but then the actual changing of the scene is gonna happen on the main thread, because it's gonna be in the update function. Hopefully this was clear. I know it's a little bit confusing, but it confused me too when I first stumbled onto this problem. Okay, so let's create another account. I'm running out of emails because I did a lot of testing in order to figure out that problem. I'm gonna call myself Nico though still, and let's sign up, and now I'm actually in this scene. We can also sign out, and I should go back to the... Oh, I forgot to make the code to make me go back to the other scene. Okay, so if we actually go to the main scene manager, other than signing me out, it also needs to stop listening for messages because we don't care anymore. So we can go to Database API and do stop listening, and the callback doesn't have to be a message because we're not listening for messages anymore. And we can just say that after you stop listening for messages, you can sign out. And then, yeah, we're going to have the same exact problem right here. We're just going to create a flag, which is sign out completed. And right here in update, we are going to just check if the sign-in is not completed. We're going to return, else we are going to go to the other scene. And here we can do sign out completed equal to true. Okay, great, this works. But now actually you will see that when we type a message, we're also going to type it without any nickname, so it's going to go very poorly. And the reason for that is because we removed this input field right here. Where is it? Okay, well, I actually changed the code, so it's not going to match up. But the reason for this is because we removed this input field right here, the sender nickname. The reason we removed it is because we are not going to need it anymore. We can remove it, we can delete it. And right here, instead of using the sender nickname, that input field, in order to have the nickname of the user, we're just going to use the user ID that we already retrieved because we signed up, which is basically going to be API handler.instance.getUserID. So basically the user ID is something you can get when you sign in as a user, and is a unique identifier for that user. This means that I'm the only user that can have this string, this ID, and when I send a message, you know that this message comes from me. Okay, but now the last thing I want to do before ending the video is, actually parsing this user ID, transforming this user ID into a nickname. Because naturally, in any chat, like WhatsApp or Telegram or whatever chat you use, it's gonna be really ugly if when you write a chat, your name, instead of being your actual name, it's just a string of random letters and numbers. We don't want that. So we actually want to translate this user ID into something actually humanly readable, which is your nickname. And this is the reason why we were storing the nickname on the database. So now, having that user ID, we can just go look up the user ID on the database and retrieve the nickname. Now we actually still have to sort this because for some reason Firebase is auto-generating a branch name, just like it's doing for the messages. And we actually don't want this right here. All we have to do right here in the database API is just, instead of pushing the user, basically all that .push function does is that it generates this new random child ID where you put the data into. And this was actually pretty useful for our messages because we wanted random messages ID, but this is not what we want for our users. So now let's actually reset all of our users because, we're probably going to change, we're probably going to create new ones. Now, inside the message object, we have the sender. Currently, the sender is the ID, as you can see, but we actually don't want it to be the ID. Now, we have a function that can post a user. All we need is a function that can retrieve a user. Public void get user. And it's gonna do the exact opposite, so we can just copy most of the code, which is gonna work. It's gonna return, naturally, a user object. Okay, so this is giving me problems because there are two methods that return the same parameter. It doesn't know which one to pick. So we're just gonna tell him that this is a task data snapshot. Alright, so right here, we're gonna do the exact same thing, except in the callback, we are actually gonna return the data snapshot. So it's gonna be task.result. And we're actually gonna deserialize this data because it's gonna be, by default, it's gonna be JSON. So we're gonna do result.getRowJSON value. string serialization API.deserialize, and the type is going to be the user because we are retrieving the user. Great, and now all of this as a user. And now when are we going to retrieve the user? Well, it's pretty simple. We're going to retrieve him as soon as we sign in. So in the main scene manager in the start, we can do API handler.instance.database API. And right here we're going to have a variable which is going to be the current user. And as a callback, we're just going to set the current user variable to the user we actually get back, which is going to be the one we get back from the function, which is this one. Okay, and also as a fallback, we're going to have the debug.log. And now, okay, no, there are no exceptions. This is great. Okay, and now, instead of right here, actually posting as a sender the user ID, we don't need to do that. We just can post right here the current user dot nickname. Great. And now one last thing we need to do is that, this function actually is going to take a while to execute because it needs to retrieve the user from the database. So just in case the user has a really slow internet connection and he attempts to send a message before we actually retrieve his user, we can actually right here stop him. So we can say if the current user is equal to null, you can return. And right here you can debug.log any error message like wait a second, still loading or something like that. Now this design of having the user right here is kind of rushed. What maybe you would like to do is actually take this user variable and put it in the auth API. And so you can have it right here, private user. And actually every time you sign in, you can actually automatically retrieve the user. And then right here you can have another function, which is just going to retrieve the user. It's going to be getUser, and it's going to just give you back the user. You know what? Let's actually do this, because I think it's going to look better. So instead of writing the code to get the user right here in the main scene, we're actually going to get the user as soon as we sign in. So we're going to remove it from here because we don't need it. And we're going to copy this code. And instead of current user, we actually don't need to do any checks now. We can just go to the API handler.instance.authAPI.getUser. And this user is never going to be null because we're only going to be in this scene once we are already signed in. And right here, we can actually set the user to the auth API. So we can just do API handler.instance.authAPI.setUser, and it's going to be this user right here. While in the sign up, we actually don't need to do that because we already have the user. We are creating it ourselves. So right here, before posting the user, we're actually going to create a variable with the user. We're going to call it new user, which is going to be this one. And we're going to post the new user, but we're also going to put this new user in the auth. Okay, great. So now both when we sign up and sign in, we are setting this user variable right here. And this user variable is going to be used in the main scene right here when we actually get it in order to post the message as this name. Now, if everything works correctly, when we actually hit play, we are gonna post the message as our name. And by the way, Firebase remembers the user and the password, so you actually don't need to sign in. You can actually check if the current user is null or not. But in my case, I'm just gonna sign in every time. This is not the purpose of this video. Did I mess up the email again? Oh no, I just deleted the user, so there is no email. Okay, so I'm gonna sign up. Okay, great. And now these messages were just old messages. Now let's write a new one. Oh, my nickname is empty though. I forgot to write a nickname. Okay, I don't know what is gonna happen then. We're just gonna write A. Is it gonna give me an exception? Yeah, no. It's just gonna be an empty nickname because I forgot to set my nickname. Okay, let's sign out and let's try again. Oh, and interestingly enough, I forgot to actually check the sign out button. So let's see why it's not doing anything. Oh, it's because we actually never used the callback. I'm so dumb. Okay, right here, when we stopped listening for messages, we actually never hit the callback. Do we even need a callback? I mean, nothing can go really wrong. And I think this happens instantly. So we don't even need the callback, really. Yeah, that was dumb on my part. So we can just go right here, where we have our function. And we don't need all of this mess. We can just write the code. Boom, like this. And this will actually simplify things a lot, because since we are not in an action, we don't actually need to do all of this flag. We can just load the scene from here. Boom, so we can delete all of this code that we did before. Okay, great, this was much simpler. Now I think this is gonna be the last test, because after this everything should work wonderfully well. And let's actually create a new account, which is just gonna be this. The nickname is gonna be Nico Test, okay? Just so it's different. and it's always gonna be the same password because whatever. We're gonna sign up. Yes, we're gonna try to write something, and we have the correct username. But now if we sign out, and I think I forgot the email, hopefully it's this one. We don't need to write the nickname because we are signing in now, we're not signing up. If we sign in, there is no username. Okay, then I forgot the email. I have a really short memory. Oh, it's A, okay. A, and we sign in. And now we do this again. I'm scared. This works. Okay, so that was it. We successfully made a system, a chat system that works and is also authenticated. So the user can choose his nickname and all of that stuff. And also I just realized this video is over an hour long. In the next episode we're gonna see how to edit and delete messages. And honestly, I'm loving this series because it's a really good way not only to teach Firebase and how it works with the SDK implementation in Unity, but it's also really good because I can show you the way I structure the code and how I do it for Firebase, and how and why structuring it this way will make it look cleaner and it will be easy to, you know, find all of the stuff that you need. It actually took me a while to find this structuring. And it's actually something I found out by myself while doing projects that turned out into being just spaghetti code. And so I'm glad I can share this with you. But now that said, the video is already really long. Thank you ever so much for making it to the end. You are amazing, really. You should leave a like and subscribe if you enjoyed the content. And I'm gonna see you guys in the next video. See ya!